So I'm here at the Harpa Center with an astrobiologist from the University of Arizona at the Beacon 2025 conference. He's just given a fascinating paper which asks, how can we define habitability in a way to apply it to the planets, the extrasolar planets that we have been discovering over the past 2 or 3 decades, and rank them in terms of priority for further investigation. And you're trying to come up with a formula that's quantitative. Explain what you mean by quantitative in this sense, and what this all is, and the next steps, Daniel.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bruce. So we basically identified a need to talk quantitatively about habitability, and that means being able to assign a number for a likelihood of a given habitat environment being suitable for life. And that could be an exoplanet, but it could also be a solar system surface or interior of a body. We wanted basically to have numbers, a probability assigned, so that we can prioritize, decide where to allocate our resources, and if we do find a potential signature of life, to have a probability that it actually emerges from an environment that's suitable for life. If it does not, then we would have a different interpretation for that signal.
Do astrobiologists and astronomers currently do they currently argue over what defines habitability even?
Oh yes, it's a difficult to define term, and the root of the challenge here ultimately is that we don't have a really good universal definition of life, right? So we cannot just derive from that definition the requirements for life, but rather we work with the examples that we know on Earth, and then we try to in some ways generalize from that.
And how would you define loosely a habitable zone or a planet in a habitable zone?
So we basically are looking at what makes, for example, a planetary surface or a planetary interior habitable. And in our framework, that means that we actually look at a specific, we call it a metabolism, but it could be a single species, or organism even, or an ecosystem. And we ask what are the requirements, environmental requirements of that species or ecosystem to survive. And by modeling and inferring the properties that are in the habitat, we can ask, are the temperature, pressure conditions, pH conditions, etc., suitable for that organism to survive? And if yes, then the answer is yes. And we can, because of course the challenge is that we never have complete understanding of these environments. So we can basically work. Part of the framework does this, that we work with uncertainties, and we end up with a probability. It can be a high or a low probability that this environment is suitable for life.
But metabolism is a key to life. I mean, that's one of the keys.
Yeah.
Explain why that is.
So we basically use metabolism here in large part because the exchange of materials and energy is essential for life.
Give us a parenthetical definition of metabolism.
So this would be basically the flow of material and through the organism, and exchange of material and energy with the environment.
It's a way of an organism harvesting energy to continue its
that's right.
life.
It's basically
what we call life.
Exactly, yes, right. To maintain a physical, chemical structure and machinery that's required for life.
And as humans, we know for a fact as we age, our metabolism slows down, and when you're much younger, you burn your energy in a much faster mechanism.
That's correct, yes.
And for people who are over 50, that's a huge issue.
Yep. Yes, exactly. So metabolism basically is, we have different types of organisms on Earth that use similar metabolism, and oftentimes the type of metabolism used is actually determining to a significant degree the environments in which these organisms can exist. So in our framework, we actually center this around metabolisms. And so, for example, we look at organisms that use methane, produce methane, use hydrogen to produce methane to provide secure their energy, and so those organisms tend to have similar environmental requirements.
So what about organisms that have extremely slow metabolisms over hundreds or even thousands of years?
Exactly, yeah.
And we found evidence of those in the very deep subsurface on Earth.
Yep.
So what do we do when we're trying to look at those?
Yes, exactly. So basically, our framework, I think, is the first that allows one to compare very different habitats on the same basis. So our framework does work on planetary surfaces, and we show it works in planetary interiors or oceans in the same way. We basically, part of the assessment that we carry out is to build a model, a computer model, if you like, for the organisms, the species that we study. And so these can be both slow or fast metabolisms. We currently base our knowledge on terrestrial species, non-Earth life, but we have an ability within this framework to extrapolate beyond the life as we know it.
Okay, and the next one of the missions that we are all excited about is the Habitable World Observatory. And I'm not certain about the funding for that. Do you know anything about the funding for the HWO?
Well, of course, a lot is changing now, so it's difficult to answer. I think the Habitable World Observatory is something that the community is very excited about. It would be a major step forward, so we all hope that that priority will remain.
And the goal is for it to identify.
Yes, the goal is basically for the Habitable World Observatory to discover and then characterize about 20-25 Earth-sized planets, and then figure out how many of those are truly potentially Earth-like, and then among those to provide enough data so that we can look for signatures of life and then hopefully find life.
And your quantitative framework would provide a structure for the order in which we actually sort these planets out and observe them, do follow-up observations.
That's right, yes. We basically, the quantitative habitability framework, we have developed it around a couple of use cases. One of the use cases is to help with target prioritization for Habitable World Observatory, but also for other, for example, a very large ground-based telescope. So the initial target sample will be probably fixed because HW will observe pretty much everything it can. But once the initial observations have happened, we will have a better understanding. We discovered the planets, we have a better understanding of them, and then there will be the question, how you allocate your time, which one you study in greater detail. And I think that is a critical phase where our framework can really help.
So what's the biggest challenge in all this?
It is a real complexity, and I mean the biggest challenge is that we don't have a good definition for life that is universal. So we had to build basically a framework that allows one to rigorously handle uncertainties and unknowns, and be pretty transparent and clear about it so that we still can get quantitative answers, recognizing what is that we know and what is that we don't.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for your time today.
Thank you, Bruce.